The plane landed hard, and Evan Miller felt it in his chest before the wheels even screamed against the runway. He hadn't slept, he hadn't eaten. He'd booked the first flight home at dawn, hands shaking, because a single message from his mother had cut through 6 years of silence. "I need you. Please." Chicago looked the same from the window gray sky. Busy lines of traffic, the promise of movement that never slowed. Evan told himself this trip was temporary. A few days. A visit. A favor. He told himself that grown men didn't fear front doors anymore. At the gate, his mother wrapped him in a hug that felt too tight, like she was afraid he might disappear again. "You're here," she whispered, relief and worry tangled in her voice. Evan breathed in the smell of her coat and felt 12 years old all over again. Then he saw Richard. Richard stood a step behind, arms crossed, eyes sharp and unreadable. He didn't move, he didn't smile. He looked Evan up and down as if measuring a loss. So Richard said finally, "You came back. It wasn't a welcome. It was a verdict." The drive home was quiet. The city slid past the windows, familiar and distant at the same time. Evan watched the stoplights and the old storefronts, remembering who he had been when he left young, hopeful, convinced that distance could fix everything. He tried to talk, to explain his work in Toronto, the clients he had earned, the life he had built piece by piece. Richard answered with short sounds that said he wasn't listening. "Design work," Richard said once, eyes on the road. "That's not a real job." Linda shifted in her seat but said nothing. The house appeared at the end of the block, unchanged. Same porch, same cracked steps, same heavy front door. Evan carried his bag inside and felt the air close around him. The walls held old arguments, old rules, old silences. Richard didn't wait. "So this is it," he said, setting his keys down too hard. 6 years gone, and you come back empty-handed." Evan opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried again. "I work with firms. I lead projects." Richard cut him off with a laugh that wasn't loud but still hurt. "You ran away," he said. "Don't dress it up." The words landed one after another, quick and clean, leaving no marks anyone could see. Evan felt them anyway. He felt them in his shoulders, in the way his voice shrank. Linda busied herself in the kitchen, moving plates that didn't need moving. Evan followed her with his eyes, hoping she would turn around, say something, anything. She didn't. That night, Evan lay in his childhood room, staring at the faint glow of old stars stuck to the ceiling. He remembered putting them there, convinced they would guide him somewhere better. The house creaked, the heater kicked on. Down the hall, Richard's voice rose and fell, talking to someone on the phone. Laughter sharp and careless. Evan turned on his side and pressed his face into the pillow. He told himself he would leave soon. He told himself he could handle a few days. Morning came fast. The kitchen smelled like coffee and tension. Richard sat at the table reading the paper, his presence filling the room. Evan poured himself a cup and waited. "So what's the plan?" Richard asked without looking up. "You staying long?" "I'm here for my mom," Evan said. Simple. True. Richard folded the paper. "You always had excuses." Evan felt something tighten inside him. He set the mug down before his hand could shake. "I built a life," he said. "It just didn't look like yours." Richard smiled thinly. "Life is what you can show for it." Evan left the house before the words could stack any higher. Outside, the air was cold and honest. He walked without direction, past streets he knew by heart, past the park where he once planned his escape. He sat on a bench and let the noise of the city move around him. He checked his phone. No messages, no missed calls. The quiet felt heavy. When he returned, the house was still. Linda was out. Richard's car was gone. Evan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He packed and unpacked his bag just to keep busy. Told himself this visit was about his mother. He told himself not to expect more. That evening, Linda came home late, eyes tired. They ate dinner quietly. Evan wanted to ask what was wrong. He didn't. Some habits are learned early. Later, he stepped onto the porch for air. That's when he heard a soft struggle next door, cardboard scraping concrete. Small, frustrated laugh. "Sorry," a voice said, more amused than upset. Evan looked over. A woman stood by a stack of boxes, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up. She smiled at him like they'd known each other for years. "Need a hand?" Evan asked, already moving. "Only if you don't mind," she said. "I underestimated these. They lifted together." The box was heavier than it looked, but manageable. Evan set it down and wiped his hands on his jeans. "I'm Evan," he said. "Claire," she replied. "Just moved in." They talked in short, easy sentences. About the weather, about the street, about how boxes always lie. The conversation didn't ask anything of him. It didn't judge. Evan felt his shoulders lower without thinking. "You're new?" Claire asked. "Back," he said. "For a bit." She nodded, understanding more than he said. "That can be strange." They sat on her steps with 2 cups of water she brought out, the sky darkening above them. Evan told her about the flight, the sudden call, the feeling of being pulled backward. He didn't mention names. He didn't need to. Claire listened. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she said, "Coming home doesn't always mean comfort." Evan smiled, surprised. "You too." "Recently," she said. "Different reasons, same feeling." The porch light flicked on behind Evan. He stood. "I should go. Anytime," Claire said. "If you want to talk. Or lift more boxes." Few went inside, lighter than he had felt all day. The next morning, Richard's mood was worse. Comments came faster, sharper, aimed, and practiced. Evan answered less. He focused on his breathing. On the hours passing. On the fact that he had a place next door where his name wasn't a problem. By afternoon, Evan realized something had shifted. He still felt the weight of the house, but it no longer pressed him flat. He had choices. He had distance inside himself. Even while standing in the same rooms. That night, he lay in bed and stared at the ceiling stars again. They glowed faintly, stubborn, and small. Evan closed his eyes and made a quiet promise he hadn't made before. He wouldn't disappear again. Not this time. The next morning, Evan woke to sunlight spilling across his old bedroom floor, warm but almost mocking in its brightness. He didn't want to move, but he had a strange pull to go outside, as if the air itself promised something different today. Something that didn't come with the weight of the house or Richard's sharp words. As he stepped onto the porch, he saw her, Claire, struggling again with a box near the side of her house. She looked up and gave him that same soft, surprised smile that made the tension in his chest loosen just a little. "Need help?" he asked before thinking. The words came easily now. "Only if you don't mind," she said, and this time she didn't even hesitate. They lifted the box together, hands brushing briefly, and for a second, Evan forgot about Richard, about the judgment waiting for him inside the walls he had grown up in. They carried the box to the porch, set it down, and for the first time since landing, Yvonne felt something that resembled hope. "I'm glad you're back," Claire said, after a pause. Not in the way his mother said it, hesitant, worried, but calm, genuine. Evan nodded, unsure if she meant it for him or for the idea of being home itself. Coffee followed. They sat on her porch steps talking about small things, the town, the weather, moving in and out, life that had somehow slowed while they were away. No pressure, no judgment. Evan spoke freely about his work, the projects he had built, the life he had fought to create in Toronto. And she listened without interruption, without comparison. It was quiet, honest, and for someone used to defensiveness and criticism, it felt like a revelation. Inside, though, the house was the same pressure cooker of old. Richard's comments grew sharper, pointed, meant to sting. "You're back, but still useless," he muttered one morning as Evan moved past him in the hallway. Evan wanted to argue, wanted to explain himself again, but the words fell flat. Instead, he left the house more often, finding excuses to walk, to breathe, to see Claire, to feel human instead of under scrutiny. Day by day, Evan noticed subtle changes. He laughed more with Claire, felt lighter when he left the house, and even started noticing details of the town he had never paid attention to before: the murals on brick walls, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the way the sun glinted off the river in the evenings. His hometown didn't feel like a trap anymore. It felt alive. One evening, after another stinging remark from Richard, Evan returned to his room and sat on the bed, heart racing. Instead of curling inward, he thought about Claire, about how she had treated him like a person, like someone worth listening to. The anger he usually felt toward Richard now had an edge of clarity. He wasn't defined by Richard's words, and maybe he never had been. The next day, he helped Claire unpack more boxes. Their hands brushed repeatedly over the edges of cardboard, and neither seemed to care. They talked about family, about mistakes, about leaving and coming back. Claire revealed her own story: how she had left a broken engagement, how returning to the town was meant to heal more than just her surroundings. Evan found comfort in hearing her struggles, recognizing the same mix of fear and hope he carried. A week passed. Evan's phone buzzed with an unexpected email. A firm he had pitched a project 2 months ago had accepted it, not just accepted it, but planned to feature it in a major showcase. Evan's hands shook as he read it. He had built this life from scratch, yet somehow being home had allowed him to appreciate what he had accomplished. He showed Claire immediately. She cheered quietly, tears in her eyes, and for the first time, Evan felt proud of himself in a way that had nothing to do with approval from others. Not Richard, not even his mother. It was just him, man, the life he had made. That night, Evan packed a bag. Not to escape, not to run, but to prepare for the next stage of his life. A life that didn't have to be defined by old rules or criticism. He stood in the doorway of the house, looking at the familiar walls, and for the first time, the home that had haunted him felt neutral. It no longer pressed down on him. He hugged his mother briefly, seeing her eyes full of gratitude and worry. Richard said nothing as usual, but Evan didn't need acknowledgement anymore. Outside, Claire was waiting, car keys in hand. She smiled at him, patient, calm, encouraging. "Where to now?" she asked. "Forward," Evan said without hesitation, his voice steady. This time, not alone. The car door closed behind them, and as they drove down the familiar streets of the town, Evan noticed details he had overlooked for years: the sound of children playing, the golden streetlights flickering on, the smell of rain on asphalt. It felt like a world waiting for him, not one demanding he fit into its old boxes. He realized that coming home hadn't healed all wounds. Richard's presence, the tension, the familiar judgments, they still existed. But something had changed inside him. He had discovered resilience he hadn't known he possessed. He had found someone who saw him, really saw him, and he had rediscovered the possibility of choosing his own path. Instead of following the one others had forced upon him, Claire glanced at him as they turned a corner, her hand brushing his briefly on the gear shift. There was no rush, no pressure, just a quiet understanding. Evan smiled, the weight in his chest easing with every mile. "I think," he said softly, "this is the first time I'm actually going home and feeling like it's mine to live in." Claire nodded. "It's yours. Make it count." Evan felt a spark of something bright. Hope. Maybe love. Maybe just the relief of being seen. He let it fill him as the city lights grew distant behind them and the open road stretched ahead. He wasn't running. He was moving forward. And for the first time in years, the future felt like his by the time night fell. The town had vanished in their rearview mirror, replaced by endless possibilities. The air smelled of rain and freedom, and Evan realized he could breathe again. Not the shallow kind, not the cautious kind, real breathing. "Thank you," he said to Claire quietly, though she hadn't done anything heroic, only simple human things. "For listening, for just being here." She smiled, calm and reassuring. "We all need someone like that sometimes. I'm glad it's me." Evan didn't answer, not because he had nothing to say, but because he finally understood. Some journeys aren't about leaving. They're about coming back with new eyes. Some battles aren't won with loud arguments. They're won by simply choosing yourself. Even when the world doubts you, and as the first lights of dawn touched the horizon, Evan felt the old weight lift. The house, the town, Richard's sharp edges, they were still there, but they no longer held power over him. He had his life, his choices. And someone beside him who made it all feel possible. For the first time, Evan realized that home wasn't a place. It wasn't a room or a porch or a judgmental gaze. Home was the clarity to know who you are. And the courage to move forward even when the past tried to pull you back. Claire reached over and squeezed his hand. Gentle and grounding. Evan squeezed back, the motion small but significant. A signal to himself that he could finally let go of old fears. The road ahead was long, but it no longer felt frightening. With each turn of the wheels, Evan's heart grew lighter. Each mile a promise that this time he would be seen, he would be heard, and he would live on his own terms. And as the sun rose higher, painting the sky in golds and pinks, Evan smiled, finally feeling free enough to believe that the best parts of life were still waiting for him.